Hi there, and welcome to the podcast Life as a show intently focused on exploring and unearthing the details of professions and the people behind them. I'm your host, Christopher Schoenwald. There are literally no days that go by without coming across some sort of news item or reference to an environmental concern or issue. For good reason, of course. What we have done to ourselves by way of our treatment of our planet and living space in a relatively short amount of time has been utterly shocking. There are reasons why environmental alarm bells are blaring. Statistics, global studies from widely respected scientists and think tanks clearly indicate that our current trajectory and way of life is not sustainable. By all accounts, we are in environmental crisis mode. Now, this is not to say that there's no hope. In fact, a quick Google search under the search parameters environmental crisis generates 3.2 billion results. We are aware of the challenges. Now it's time for action. On today's show, I have a guest who has made it her mission to help amplify this cause as far as furthering discussion on sustainability and inspiring action on that very matter. Joy Jarman-Walsh, or JJ, as she has become known, is a talk show host of the program Seek Sustainable Japan. Joy is a longtime resident of Hiroshima, Japan, who grew up in Hawaii, a graduate of Pitzer College in California, the University of Birmingham, UK, and Arizona State University. She holds a BA in psychology, a master's in applied linguistics, and a master's in sustainable tourism. She co-founded the website Get Hiroshima in 2000 and taught marketing, travel, business, and gender communication studies to university students for 21 years. In 2019, she launched Inbound Ambassador, a consulting and travel guide training business. In 2020, during the COVID pandemic, Joy launched her own talk show, Seek Sustainable Japan, to connect with entrepreneurs, writers, artists, innovators, and experts across Japan doing interesting and inspiring projects. Most weekends, you'll find Joy organizing a river or beach cleanup, live streaming at an off-the-beaten-path location, or seeking out great coffee and Japanese sweets. JJ, with all that said, I'm really excited to have you on the show. Welcome.
Thank you so much for having me. That is a fabulous intro. I love that. I'm going to use that clip on my website. People are always asking, what do you do again?
Yeah. Perfect. Yeah, no, it's quite impressive, your background. And I'm really, really excited to get into all of it today. So yeah, why don't we?
Awesome. So happy to be here. Thanks, Chris.
Yeah, no problem. The first segment, JJ, is something called Coloring Wikipedia. As my listeners will know, basically it's a segment where I just read off a definition of the guest profession. And I like to do it for a couple of reasons. I mean, one, it brings everyone up to speed on what the job really is all about. And then two, I think it offers this launching pad, if you will, for the guests to kind of like look at their job and some of the things that maybe aren't in the definition, but they know are very much part of it. So I have you down here, Joy, for a talk show host. And yeah, let me just read that off for you. And while I'm doing so, perhaps you can just think about it within the context of Seek Sustainable Japan. Sound good?
Sounds great.
All right, here goes. Talk show host. A talk show host, or chat show in British English, is a television programming or radio programming genre structured around the act of spontaneous conversation. A talk show is distinguished from other television programs by certain common attributes, of which include the following. Talk shows focus on the viewers, including the participants calling in, sitting in a studio, or viewing from online or on TV. Talk shows center around the interaction of guests with opposing opinions and/or differing levels of expertise, which include both experts and non-experts. Although talk shows include guests of various expertise levels, they cater to the credibility of one's experiences and rationalities as opposed to educational expertise. Talk shows involve a host responsible for furthering the agenda of the show by mediating, instigating, and directing the conversation to ensure the purpose is fulfilled. The purpose of talk shows is to either address or bring awareness to conflicts, to provide information, or to entertain. Talk shows consist of evolving episodes that focus on differing perspectives in respect to important issues in society, politics, religion, or other popular areas. And finally, talk shows are either aired live or are recorded live with limited post production editing. There you go, JJ. A bit of a mouthful, but what do you think? How well does it fit
Well,
for you and your program?
that is the institutionalized version of a talk show.
Yeah.
And actually, when I first started my talk show, that's the reason I chose 60 minutes, is because you can have a good conversation in 60 minutes, just like the show 60 Minutes, which is a talk show, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And finding interesting ideas from the expert guest. What did they say? Not education.
Yeah,
Like,
right.
there
That one
is
stood out to me too.
really
Yeah.
interesting definition there. And of
Yeah.
course, doing it as an independent content creator is very different from doing it as a company who has just the host. They do all the research. They have a team doing editing. They have a team doing video production. It's me, myself, and I for
Yeah.
this production over here.
Yeah, I hear you.
And I think it's interesting, isn't it? Because I do have the underlining theme of sustainability, and how I would define that is trying to find a balance and a better way forward in terms of quality of life for people, preserving and protecting the planet, and finding a way to have a stable income, which is that people, planet, profits in balance is like the focus,
Yeah.
right? So that is my underlining theme. And I do wonder sometimes when you see like Stephen Colbert of The Late Show, or you see the show 60 Minutes, they have themes of their own, right? Like they're focused on politics, or they're focused on political humor, or trying to news of the day, that kind of thing. So I think having an underlining theme is really important. But basically, I can talk about sustainability, I think, with anybody.
Yeah.
So it kind of opens up who I reach out to and want to talk to. I think we can find issues in almost anything to do with work, life, or travel. So it's quite wide.
Yeah, most definitely. Was there anything within the definition that was missing, if you will, in terms of what you do? It's very much part of what you do, but wasn't really covered by the definition itself.
Yeah, there is the interview hosts that I really respect are usually women who do their research well, but who also are able to pivot and share something that they've learned before, or their own experience or background can relate to the issue at hand, and something that that interviewee just said. And I think that's something that I feel like I do quite well, that I'm able to bring other interview knowledge, or bring my own experiences to the table, or simplify what they're saying so the general audience can understand. And I think there are some talk show hosts that don't seem to do that very well. And there are some that do that so well, so that's definitely what I'm aiming for, is to make connections for the audience, not just to have an expert tell us things and we listen, but engaging more, deeper knowledge, I think, deeper experience.
I can certainly attest to that. I'm a big fan of your show as well. So, I mean, that's certainly something that I picked up on really early on, is just that, how you're synthesizing a lot of the content that you're taking from the guests, and then bringing it down at times, if need be, to a level where it is accessible to listeners, and then also adding your own insights as well, based on your own experiences, or perhaps conversations with past guests. So yeah, and that's something that wasn't exactly within the definition, but very much a part of a successful program like yours. So
it's also, it needs to add that the host, I think, whether you have researchers helping you or not, you need to be invested in the topic. to make it an effective talk show, right?
Yeah.
And I always think about this kind of like being a detective, like Nancy Drew. I was a big fan of Nancy Drew growing up. So you have to do your research on the person you're interviewing. You have to find out information, see the other interviews, listen to podcasts they've done, and then things will come out that help you ask the right questions on the day. I don't think there's any good talk show host that is just handed questions and is able to do it effectively. They themselves have to be invested.
That's a really good point. Really strong point there, JJ. Yeah, thank you for sharing that. I think that's such a critical component to all of this. So, shifting off into a new question really quickly within the segment, what would be a typical day for you, I suppose?
I have shifted my, and I was on Twitter just earlier with someone who said they're exhausted. They can't even get through their non-alcoholic beer at night. They're so exhausted. And so my habit, since I started working for myself, I've just started kind of following what kind of schedule works for me more instead of the time I feel I should go to bed or I should wake up, like just kind of following my body clock more. Which is a bit crazy as you get older. So I wake up at 5 and I'm usually wiped out by 9 p.m.
That is my exact schedule, JJ. Exact.
Okay. I'm not the only one.
No, not at all.
I love waking up early. It's nice and quiet. I get a lot of things done. And then quite often I'll have like a 9 a.m. show. So if I'm up at 5, researching and diving into the topic, by the live show at 9, it's all really fresh in my mind, which I love that. And then after the show, I'll usually go out for a sanity walk, which has helped me stay healthy, but also it helps you work out a lot of the ideas that you're talking about, or you might kind of repeat some of the things, and then you might add it to show notes because you didn't quite answer it or bring it up in the conversation, but it's something you want to ask that guest back and talk about more, or you want to write a post about. It kind of triggers other ideas. So I find getting out for that walk is really useful. And then I come back and I do other work, reaching out to other people who might be possible guests, writing posts, doing the audio part from the video, making podcasts. Usually a busy day, I would be working after the walk until 3 or 4 p.m. and then turning off my computer, making dinner, doing family stuff, maybe doing another walk if it's a nice day. Like today, oh my gosh. The spring, the cherry blossoms are out. I have to go out and take more photos. I love it.
Short sleeves today.
Beautiful.
Yeah, I'm ready for it. I'm absolutely ready for it. No, that's great. I think it paints a really nice picture of, the life that you're involved with right now in terms of the work side and also blending in the personal. I can attest to all of that as well. I mean, that's as I said earlier, same schedule. I think our only fear, at least my fear, is that the wage we're at right now, by the time we get to about 60 or 70, we're going to be right within that gap of going to bed at 7 p.m. and up at 3 a.m. That's a bit of a fear here that I have, but we're already up at 5 a.m. at this age. But
I know, Chris, I hear you. And sometimes I'll have these weird times in my life where I'm waking up in the middle of the night. And it's always at weird times, like 2:22 or 3:33. I have a clock next to me. Or 4:44, which is really bad luck in Japan. You don't want to wake up at that time.
Okay. Mental note.
You gotta force yourself to go back to sleep somehow, because if you start getting up in the middle of the night, there's no stopping any kind of normal schedule, right?
That's right. All right. Well, why don't we slide on over into a new segment here, something called a Q&A discovery. We can kind of extend this back and forth conversation. And the first question I have, I kind of want to delve back into your own personal history. I read a little bit off of it or about it in the bio there, but in terms of your relationship to Japan, what originally brought you here, and then what's kept you here for this amount of time Perhaps you could share that.
Like my talk show continuing for 2 years, it's always a surprise that I've been here this long. And I'm still enjoying living here and still finding new things to discover and keeps me interested. Originally I came over on the JET program.
Yep. Okay.
So after university, my parents split up when I was in high school. My dad remarried a Japanese woman. They moved to Japan, this area of Kyushu called Oita.
Okay.
And so when I was finishing university, I was already entered into graduate school for psychology to
Wow.
continue and become a psychologist or a
Hmm.
counselor or something with psychology. But I thought I'd take a year gap after school and I'd go be a jet in Japan, have that experience, come back to America and continue my career path as intended,
Yeah. Sorry to interrupt. Just for
Yeah.
listeners who don't know, JET is the Japanese government program that brings over foreign teachers from other countries to help teach within junior high schools, oh, even elementary, junior, and senior high schools. Sorry to interrupt. I just wanted
No,
to get
no,
that
no
in there.
problem.
Yeah.
I just interviewed a woman who's a stand-up comedian the other day, and she happens to be from Oita. And I think I
Hmm.
broke everyone's ears because I was like, no way, it's such a small place.
Yeah.
But when I was doing my jet interview, they said, oh, where do you want to go in Japan? And I said Oita, and they're like, really? Okay. Usually people say Hokkaido or Tokyo or Osaka or
Yeah.
Kyoto,
Yeah.
they're like, really? Okay. So I think that was kind of my in, and the fact
Yeah.
that I would have family there, so have some support. When you're in the deep rural, sometimes it's really hard for people to make
Yeah.
that adjustment, right?
Certainly.
Yeah. So I was jet for that first year, which became 3 years because I really enjoyed teaching. It was just a whole new turn for me, something I'd never thought about before. I was a team teacher, so I wasn't a trained teacher. It was just like a great experience of learning a new culture and language. I dove
Yeah.
right into language classes, really tried to travel around Japan as much as I could. I ended up meeting my now husband, who's from the UK, who was also a jet in Oita, and we traveled around a lot together. I started doing triathlon, so I
Wow.
would get into the deep rural area and do races and
Oh, wow.
meet local people. But it was a really great way to see the countryside as well.
Yeah. Yeah. Sounds like you're just completely immersing yourself within the country, the culture, the region. Yeah. And just in essence, like putting those roots into the ground that, yeah, I could see playing a big part of probably why you're still here right now. But I'll let you continue and answer that.
Well, after 3 years in Oita, we really wanted to travel more widely. So we spent 2 years traveling around Asia, a little bit of
Mm,
Europe, and then we ran out of money. And we thought, oh, we just go back to Japan just for a year or two and save up more money, and got a job in Hiroshima. Came back in 96, and then we bought an old house, got good jobs, had kids growing up bilingual, naturally, very happily here, a very safe, nice
mm,
community. There was really no reason to move away.
yeah. Yeah.
We started getting Hiroshima, so then we started having like more meaningful connections with the local community, local businesses. We started sharing information not only for international residents to have a deeper experience, but also for visitors. So then we transitioned more into working with travel and creating like travel appeal for the Hiroshima area and stuff. So we've got a really deep love of the area,
Mm,
I think, in sharing
it
it.
sounds like it. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. And
And
yeah, just,
then because of, I think I mentioned before, because of coronavirus, transitioning to online, trying to figure out how to stay relevant, what to do.
yeah. Yeah. That must have been quite, well, I mean, it was quite the time for everyone, right? With COVID and just completely like turning industries upside down and perhaps none greater than within travel and tourism. I mean, for those who don't know, I mean, Japan was one of those countries that completely locked down. And in fact, we're still locked down by, for all intents and purposes, like no tourism at all. is allowed, basically, just aside from domestic. So yeah, timing wise, that must have been quite quite the challenge for you. I mean, how did you sort of pivot? How did you deal with this
Well,
gargantuan
in
task of?
before coronavirus, I had been working for a university for 21 years, and I
Wow.
decided it was time. I loved teaching. I love working with the students and doing a lot of study abroad programs and creating the programs abroad, helping them get ready, and then
Mm-hmm.
going on the programs with them. So I had a chance to travel and engage with other people around the world in academia, as well as culturally. I think it was really good training for me, kind of using that psychology part of my background to help them settle in to new cultures in new countries and stuff. And I feel like I might be transitioning more back to that
Hmm.
for my next step of my career, but
Hmm.
we'll hint at that a little bit later. But I was really feeling like my world was so small. I was teaching great university students, but you spend so much time researching and preparing and teaching them. And then from these 20 students, how much effect or how much depth is this going to have on their lives?
Yeah.
And your passion for your subject of sustainability and psychology and gender empowerment and travel and improving things, how much benefit,
Mm.
how much
Mm.
meaning does all your effort have? So I transitioned in 2019 to starting my own business and trying to work in the real world and see my ideal ideas as an academic, how do they work in reality?
Yeah.
Try to take that risk and try it on my own. Yeah, so I was doing that from 2019. But then, like I said, coronavirus, so
Yeah.
difficult to have in-person things, transitioning to online. But the talk show has been such a great research tool, networking tool. I feel like not only am I using my skills and effort to lift up other people who need support and who need someone playing that cheerleader role,
Hmm.
but also it really benefits me in how I am able to engage with all these new topics
Yeah.
and really understand sustainability in Japan from a much wider sense, right?
Yeah, yeah, definitely. I mean, like, you have a background in it, when you educational background within sustainability, but probably by the time that you graduated to the point where we're at now, I mean, there's been so much radical shift within that whole realm. I mean, week to week, month to month, year to year, there's been a lot of change. And yeah, by having on these fantastic guests on your show, like you have been, you've probably just been exposing yourself over and over again to all these different viewpoints, finding out of different about different projects or different initiatives, different challenges, and just bringing all of that together to help inform your updated worldview on the topic and on the matter. I could see how that would be an incredibly rewarding experience for you, and quite useful in terms of like putting your twist or your take on it, and trying to again return to like that cheerleading and helping and promoting and whatnot of some of these causes and issues. So yeah.
And all of that learning, and I've heard this from a lot of your guests in the series too, all of that learning, it makes you more humble as well, because I think coming straight from academia, writing papers which
Yeah.
solve everything, like this is the way you do it. It's so simple. Just follow these steps. It'll be all right. And then getting out to the real world and having experiences and talking to all these people and realizing it's a lot more complex than
Yeah.
you realize. Of
Right.
course, there are some basic principles that we need to change, which really would make change. There are certain things that we really should change in our work life or travel, which really would have a great effect.
Yeah.
But you have to be humble and you have to accept that people are just trying to live their lives and make better decisions when they can, but it's
Yeah.
not it's not like everyone's passion to be 100% sustainable all the time. Plus, it's just not possible right now
Right.
for most people. There just are not enough options available. So it's made me a lot more realistic and a lot more humble. And I watch, I look back at my old research papers or watch, interviews that I did in the beginning. I'm giving advice, too much advice. I'm like, girl, you gotta learn. But it's been a great learning process for
Yeah.
me, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Yeah. I
I
hear you.
I realize my own strengths and weaknesses, and you realize you have to make common connections with people in a very realistic way. Like, I'm
Mm,
trying, these are my failures. You have to be honest and transparent about it.
yeah.
I'm really struggling with this one. Using way too much plastic still, like trying to
Yeah.
decompress,
Yeah.
use less. It's so hard.
It is tough.
But I am making some good choices. I bought an electric car. I've got solar panels, like trying to not buy anything in a plastic bottle for
Right.
drinking, like
Yeah.
drinking my
Which,
own,
mhm.
refillable container. So just trying to walk the walk as
Yeah.
well as talk the talk, I think is one of the
Yeah,
key things
definitely.
I've
And
I've
just
learned.
like you said, just speaking about it too and providing inspiration for others and just even ideas, like, oh, maybe I could try that. Well, that's, if just these baby steps, okay, I'll start with this one and graduate onto this one. And it just grows from there, right? So it becomes this platform where you're perhaps, working on things yourself. And like you said, you're being authentic, you're showing, the struggles of it all. But then also too, like that is what inspires others to give it a go themselves. And hey, I mean, at the end of the day, that's what it's all about, right?
Yeah.
Um,
One of the key things that I really would love to mention, though, is one of my hopes for doing this show and for doing any kind of content and sharing it is I really hope people feel some kind of spark of a new idea, or they feel inspired not to give up, you
yeah,
know?
yeah,
I
yeah,
think it's so easy to feel overwhelmed about sustainability. Oh man, it's just too hard. Why
yeah,
even try?
yeah.
But please don't give up. Like, let's all just do what we can. There are some good options out there, which are very high quality, very comfortable for your life. It's not going to cost you too much more. Like, we are headed in the right direction. We need more
Hmm.
people just talking about it.
Yeah, I agree. Well, kind of within the, I don't know, the scope of this conversation on sustainability, I think a lot of people know or have a general idea or general sense globally of what's going on, but I'm not sure to the listeners outside of Japan what they would know about how that movement is, manifesting itself within this country here, within Japan, where we're both based right now. Perhaps you could fill listeners in on that.
Yeah, it's hard. It's hard to know exactly like what's happening in a general sense. Um, there's a lot of frustration in what's not happening, but
Mm,
there are, like, I try to introduce on my website or on in my interviews, I try to introduce the small things that people are doing, which are
yeah.
really exciting and
Mhm.
which give us kind of an insight into what could be could be done, right?
Yeah.
Excuse me.
Oh, sure.
So small steps, right? Like,
Mm,
I interviewed a really interesting guy, Ian Urbina, who's an amazing journalist, investigative journalist, and
hmm.
he does this project called the Outlaw Ocean Project,
Yeah,
and
yeah, I
his
caught that.
topics are intense,
Mhm.
like slavery and horrible ocean pollution. Like, there is not one story he's covering which is not intense and overwhelming, right?
Yeah.
And I asked him, how do you not get overwhelmed? Like, he's
Mm,
very, he's got a great sense of humor, really personable guy. He does all these interviews, and he just laughed and said, you just have to focus on the small task at hand
yeah.
and do it the best that you can and keep moving forward that way. And I think that's kind of, I love that idea, and that's kind of what I'm aiming to do as well. With
Mhm.
each interview, I'm just trying to do it as best as I can, trying to have something that people might find years later and still enjoy,
Right.
that would be a great,
Yeah.
accomplishment from this series. So you
Of
just
course.
have to work on what you can, keep moving forward, try not to get overwhelmed by the big picture too much. It's overwhelming.
Are there, I'm sorry, are there other areas within Japan, or sorry, within sustainability in Japan, that maybe you feel the country isn't moving fast enough within?
Plastics. Oh
Yeah,
my gosh.
yeah. I thought that's
And
where I was going to go, but
the
yeah.
reason I say that is because, and this is, it might not be obvious for a lot of people, because you throw it in the garbage and you put it in a section called recycling, but most of the plastic is burnt, and that is termed recycling in Japan, which is not recycling.
No.
It's just not. And
Yeah.
it's very, we're talking about greenwashing a lot in sustainability, right? Saying that something is better than it is, or giving the impression that something is actually not as bad as it is, right? And
Yeah.
I think we're at that point right now in Japan for plastics. There is an idea that plastics are convenient, they're clean, but if you do a beach cleanup, you pick up almost every kind of wrapper you could imagine,
Yeah.
lots of plastic bottles. None of these things are intended to end up in the water, but they do.
They do,
They
right?
end up in our oceans. So the more you can decrease in your life, the better. So I'm always challenging myself, what can I stop buying that's always plastic, right?
Right.
So I made a rule for myself never to buy a plastic PET bottle for drinking. Like always buy a can or glass, or have my own reusable bottle. That's my personal rule to reduce what
Yeah.
I find in every beach cleanup, right?
Yeah. Oh, I know.
And that even that small step makes a difference to me, to help me keep doing it, right?
Yeah, well, and also too, and just sharing that, right? I mean, it's a simple idea, but that's also something like for myself, as you're describing that, I'm like, well, yeah, that's something I could do, as something I could easily sort of like hold myself accountable to, or at least attempt to, and just by having that conversation or sharing it, yeah, could lead to a positive outcome if you get a few more people doing that.
You never know.
Definitely,
But it's confusing, right? It's not clear.
yeah,
We are not told that recycling is not equal. So when you think of recycling, what do you think of? You think of glass, metal, paper, and plastic.
yeah,
The plastic part, to be honest, is a lie. Nothing in plastic, less than 20% is recycled in any real sense. And then you can only recycle it into like hard plastic, like they use some for the Olympics, the podium they made out of recycled plastic.
yeah.
But it requires a lot of energy. It creates a lot of pollution of its own,
Yeah.
to make that recycled plastic, and you can only use it that one extra time. It's not like metal or glass or paper, which you can recycle easier because it has value in the recycle system. It can give you money back, for the business or the recycling company or the destination that does recycling. Kamikatsu is a great example. Have you heard of Kamikatsu, the
No,
zero
I
waste
haven't.
town? So
No.
not so far from you, because you're in Okayama. So just over the bridge in Shikoku Island,
Yes.
Tokushima Prefecture, Kamikatsu is a tiny 1,500 person population town. And from 2003, they have been trying to be zero waste. And so they did not have money for curbside pickup of garbage. They did not have money for an incinerator. They did not have money for landfill. So they have been trying so hard since 2003 to really reuse and reduce all their waste. And what they have in all the sections, they separate all their trash in 45 categories.
Wow.
And on each section,
Wow.
it says how much it's going to cost the town to get rid of, like they have to pay someone to take it away, and how much they get back when the recycling company takes it. And you can guess anything plastic is a cost.
Yeah.
And anything metal, paper, or glass is a benefit. So when you see it so clearly like that, you're like, that's how all of our garbage system should look, right? Because it's too confusing for most people. And recycling is not all the same.
No. I mean, I'm learning something new here myself. You think like you're right. You just don't have the knowledge, and I guess that's part of my own ignorance relating to this topic here. But yeah, I don't want to shift blame. I mean, it probably starts with you yourself, becoming more aware. But yeah, seeing it that way, it crystallizes it for you, doesn't it? Where like, I could do this. You think you're helping, but in reality, maybe not so much. But if I did this, this, and this, now that really could be making a difference. And again, these are acts that aren't incredibly difficult, to do necessarily. They're things that, anyone could probably start to engage themselves with. So yeah, thank you for sharing that.
I have a funny story from one of my first research trips to Kamikatsu. I ended up writing about Kamikatsu for my master's for sustainable tourism, because it's such an interesting example. And I think even in Japan, definitely, but even around the world, it's such a rare situation. So I visited the town. I was in a local cafe. And I'm one of the few foreigners to have been there, right? It's just not, you don't see many foreign faces. So I'm talking to a few locals, and I'm just raving about their zero waste system. And they're like, really? Like, you like it? And is it really that special? So being an outsider who's so engaged with what they're doing and enamored of it and cheering for them, help them feel good about the difficulty of trying to live in a zero waste town.
Right.
So that part was important. But also, I think a lot of people just pass the buck, like, oh, the government should do that. Oh, the companies should do that. And definitely we need change from government and companies, but there is a lot that the individual can do, even if it's by choosing better choices in the store, even if it's by communicating on social media that you like this product because it's plastic free, like when you share on your social media, that can have a really positive effect.
Sure does.
Engaging with people in discussions like this, right? I'm constantly on Twitter. People are like, why bother that attitude? Like it's too much, too far gone.
Yeah.
I was like, but we've got some great choices. This is a great company. You should check them out,
It sounds like there's so many rewarding aspects to what you do. Like you said, we already spoke to this a little bit, but like you're taking on all these new ideas and again, synthesizing it in ways that make sense to you. And you're able to kind of package it up and put it out to others and hopefully inspire action there. Maybe you could speak a little bit more to that point. Like, what are some of the other rewards that you're getting out of this personally or professionally?
Sure. Going back to your previous question, I don't think I answered. How is the situation in Japan? So I often compare it to, in terms of travel, people seeking sustainable travel. We know that almost 80% of people abroad are looking for more sustainable options when they travel. We know that there's a much lower percentage in Japan for people who have that general awareness about sustainability in general or environmental issues. They're just, for many reasons, there just isn't that much like general understanding here.
Yeah.
But one thing that's really driving the creative change and innovation and entrepreneurship and sustainability in Japan is a focus on health benefits and convenience. So, for example, there's a company that was featured by NHK, and they're taking a lot of the vegetables that are ugly, that wouldn't sell in the normal supermarket, because everybody likes to buy the beautiful vegetable.
Perfectly round, perfectly colored.
So interesting, right?
Yeah.
So he's taking all the ugly vegetables that don't sell, and he's like making it into this vegetable sheet which you can wrap around, make like sushi or something. You can eat it. You can make it into a bowl with salad and then have your salad and eat the bowl as well. So it's a really innovative idea. But the reason it's very popular with Japanese customers is it's healthy and it's convenient. It has a very long shelf life. And for me, the added value that it's reusing a lot of the food waste, which is a big problem in Japan. That's really exciting, right?
Yeah, no doubt.
So yeah, there's some great examples. Sorry, so your more recent question, I think I've missed it now.
Sure, no problem. So it's about some of the rewards that you're getting in I guess, having your program, personally or professionally, what you're getting out of all of this. I mean, it sounds like it to me, the way you're describing it. There's a lot of enthusiasm there, and rightfully so. It's exciting. But maybe you could speak to this point a little bit more.
Yeah. So for me personally, I'm able to make better choices because I'm constantly thinking about it. I'm constantly talking to people who are doing exciting things. So I feel like there is that benefit. There aren't many cheerleaders of sustainability like me,
Yeah.
sharing all the positive information. And I think we need that more. So it does feel like a meaningful use of my time. And it is a great like online profile and platform. It's almost like a great living resume. So if people are interested in maybe having a sustainability consultant, they can see me talking with people almost every day,
Right.
And then you develop this sense of trust, I think. So I have had people reach out to me and say, oh, would you be interested in this project or this consulting work? And I was hired to go back to Kamikatsu
Awesome.
on a paid trip. So I was so happy that happened. And that probably wouldn't have happened if I wasn't talking about it all the time.
Yeah. Just the more you put yourself out there, the more opportunities that just sort of like naturally, spring up essentially. I could see how that would be incredibly rewarding. And
and one of the things that I think is difficult for some of the Japanese companies or Japanese professionals, they are very hesitant to join my live show because they're a bit worried about the live part of it, that it can't be controlled, it can't be approved by everyone. What if I say the wrong thing? What if a comment is wrong or off brand?
Japanese culture is very risk averse by nature, so I can see how that definitely
but
really open
I
yourself
have
up.
had some people reach out who want me to host their online show or something, so there is trust in that I'm not going to slam someone or talk negatively or throw them under the bus or you make them look bad. Like I am trying to be positive and supportive, and I think that also gives me credibility in terms of people trusting me to be a host for a program they want to do.
Of course, I mean, it's a body of work, essentially. Like you said, it's this living, breathing resume, essentially, that's out there for people to kind of like digest and get to know you and your work. So
that's right.
Yeah,
so that's exciting.
Okay. Well, why don't we move on over into a new segment, something called a water cooler story. You've already shared one story, but I'm going to put you on the spot here. I hope you've got another one lined up for us. I know my listeners would love to hear what you've got, so I'll let you take it from here.
So many stories. One of the ones that stands out, I had the chance, I've done a few interviews with a local organic farmer, and I really respect what he's trying to do. He's taking over a farm that was kind of derelict. He's helping not only take care of the farm with no-till and organic, taking care of the soil, but he's also like clearing a lot of the weeds and stuff up higher into the hill. He has some goats and sheep, which eat a lot of the weeds and stuff. So I was going to go and visit his farm and take video because it's so interesting and unique what he's doing.
Right.
And he invited me to go to a miso factory with him that he was going to visit with his wife. So we ended up going to this old, more than 200 years old miso factory. And I got to tour the miso factory with him and his wife. And I learned so much about their miso making and the traditions of it. But I also learned that they are very reliant on the international market, that
Mm,
because they're making a very high quality miso product, which is healthy and it's very highly regarded all over the world,
mm,
she is often welcoming. So the miso factory is run by a couple, a man and
okay.
woman, and she speaks English quite well. So she welcomes vegan chefs and health food store owners from around the world
Wow.
to this tiny, tiny town in Hiroshima called Fuchu.
Mm-hmm.
And so when I visited her, because I'm trying to be vegan as much as possible, she's like, "Oh, we can go to the next okonomiyaki shop." And I'm like, "But okonomiyaki is sometimes really hard if you're vegan, and I
Yeah.
don't know." And she's like, "Oh no, I take vegans there all the time." And this is in the middle of nowhere. So for the first time in a long time, I had vegan okonomiyaki, which was
Wow.
absolutely delicious. She had already kind of beaten the path to make it easier because she'd done it for other people.
Yeah, yeah.
She's telling me about having to import organic rice because they want to be able to export organic miso. And there really is so few places in Japan that grow organic rice. So I learned so much about, of course, like food sustainability. Do we
Mm,
have enough of what we need grown in Japan? This is something I'd never even thought of because we have usually a surplus of rice.
yeah.
So I would never expect that you have to import it. So anyway, just learning about miso, learning about import export, things I'd never thought about, and
Yeah.
then really valuing that deep like work that so many local people do to be welcoming to outsiders,
Mm,
right? Like you
mm-hmm.
can't underestimate that enough.
No.
Omotenashi gets such a bad rap, but true omotenashi, where someone really thinks about the guest and
Yeah.
what the guest needs and what the guest wants, and then is flexible and caters to that.
Yeah.
To me, that's true omotenashi. And that
Right.
is very rare in Japan. So that it's just a nice story about a depth of knowledge that I keep going back to that experience and thinking about different aspects of it because
Mm,
it was such a beautiful, deep
a very
experience,
rich
rich, right?
experience. Yeah. Yeah.
But I never would have had that chance if I hadn't connected with Thomas and
Yeah.
Cowdy
Yeah.
and then been invited as well. So you can't underestimate the value of human connection.
Oh,
It's
yeah.
amazing.
Yeah,
Yeah.
this interconnectedness. Yeah, really fascinating. I had a guest on not too recently. We were chatting about that topic, but yeah, it's something that you're right. You can't underestimate it, and especially across time as well. It's another issue related to that topic there. But no, thank you so much for sharing that. Really, really nice story there. Um, we are heading into our last segment. We've just been flying through this, Joy. It's been an absolute pleasure so far. But luckily, we'd still have one more to go. And it's called a crystal ball segment. And as the name suggests, we're looking towards the future. Usually it's trends and predictions, so on and so forth. And I know there's a lot of doom and gloom about the environment, environmental concerns. In fact, I led off with that off the top, when I was introducing this show. But also conversely, I mean, there's been a lot of positive change, and especially there's been a lot of movements and awareness campaigns, and perhaps none greater than the United Nations SDGs, Sustainable Development Goals. And I'm sure most people around the world are familiar with them now, but for those who aren't, it's basically a collection of 17 interlinked global goals designed to be essentially like a blueprint to achieve a better and more sustainable future for all. They were enacted in 2015, and the goal is to have them all achieved by 2030. So here's the question for you. Based on your experiences, based on all the fabulous guests that you've had on your own show, what's your feeling towards all of this? Do you think we're making substantial progress towards some of these goals being realized or not? I'd love to hear what you've got.
I have, in terms of the SDGs, I have seen people wear it on their lapels. I've seen school kids in Japan all have the pin, and I've seen it used in a lot of businesses over the many years
Yeah,
since it started. Japan has really embraced the
they
whole
have.
concept
Yeah,
of the SDGs, right? But in action, it's very unclear how to put it into action, right?
yeah.
So if ever I see someone with it on their lapel or on their business card, I always think that's an open opportunity to ask them about it. How are
Mm,
you doing it
what are
at
you
your
doing?
business? Yeah,
Yeah.
it's so hard, isn't it? Oh, are
Yeah,
you? That's great, you know?
yeah, yeah.
So if you're showing it, you got to have some like real examples to give people
Yeah, yeah.
about
You better
how
be
you're
ready.
actually
You better have
making it
something
work.
prepared for me. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. I like that. I like that.
But I really feel now that we are kind of I'm not sure we're coming out of the pandemic, but we are definitely finding a way to live with it.
Mm,
And I think this is the year. This year, we're starting to see more momentum for actually putting SDGs or sustainability into action. And
yes.
so recently, when I see people wearing the lapel or I see it on people's businesses or websites, which you should do, everybody should try. I have that conversation and they actually have examples and they actually understand how they're putting it into action. So I have noticed a shift, even since I started this talk show, of people actually trying to walk the walk as well
Mm,
as talk the talk.
mm,
And so I do have a feeling of hope that things are changing. Awareness is getting better. People are thinking more about how our normal everyday or our work or our travel really does affect the environment, but also how it affects other people, the
yeah.
people who make our products, the people who grow our products, the people in other countries who make and grow our products, right?
Mm,
So we need to just be thinking about it more from what is the resource used to how is the product made or service to how I use it to what happens after.
yeah.
And I think that idea of circularity is becoming a little bit more
Mm,
understandable, right?
I
So
agree.
I
I
feel
agree.
I feel positive about it.
That's great. Yeah, yeah. I feel like for me, it's almost like the weather. On certain days, I feel optimistic, and other days, I'm like, ooh, I don't know, maybe we still have a ways to go. And this morning, I mean, at the time of recording, when we're doing this episode right now, there was an article that was published by the Washington Post, and it was talking about this Russian-Ukraine crisis, and obviously all the byproducts of it. And one of them being how, of course, Russia has been exporting a lot of coal and oil and gas and so on and so forth. Now, with what's going on, of course, that's all been, kind of uncertain what's gonna happen. And the EU, in fact, has said, well, some people within the EU said, like, well, this is a great opportunity for us to finally shift away from, these traditional sources of fueling our homes and our cars and so on and so forth. Um, but ultimately, it's going to really come down to whether or not, like, how serious they are about it. And that was the thrust of this article. And I just thought that was spot on, right? I mean, we're truly gonna see. There's been so much in the way of policies or governments, leaders espousing all of these ideals related to, say, sustainability and moving forward. But when it really comes down to it, are we going to see that action? And it's compelling. Like I'm really quite curious, probably like much like people around the world, like what will this mean? Are they actually going to reduce, their dependence on these traditional forms of natural resources, or are they just going to build some new coal, factories within Europe? Like what is this really going to mean? And I think it's going to be almost like a progress report, if you will, in terms of this. We've had all these CSR initiatives and talks about doing all these great things. Well, here's your chance. Like, are we actually going to take these steps now? And this is going to be it could be a turning point, and let's hope it is.
It's such an opportunity, Chris,
Yeah,
if you
yeah,
think of it that way,
no
right?
doubt,
But the
right?
problem is government moves so slowly.
Yeah.
So what should be happening now in Japan, which is too reliant on coal still, and many other countries around the world, is to use this as an opportunity to give people incentives to make better choices.
Yeah.
So we got our solar panels years ago when the government was giving a subsidy so that we would sell anything excess that we didn't use to the grid, and we get paid back twice what we were buying from the grid. So it
Wow.
helped us pay off our solar panels faster. If the government makes that kind of initiative come back, which they've stopped, that would encourage people to make better choices, right?
Yeah.
But there's a lot of pushback, right? There's a lot of status quo pushback. We haven't done it like that until now, and it's been fine. So if it ain't broke, don't fix it kind of attitude.
Yeah.
It is broken, but they're stuck in the status quo and the way things are. And, so really we need to use this as an opportunity to make significant change. And even if the government is slow to change, we as individuals can look into buying some solar panels. All the prices have come down.
Yeah.
Look into getting that home battery. It's an investment, but it pays off if you look at it over the long term.
Yeah.
Electric cars, expensive, but I'm charging it at home with my solar panel. I'm not worried at all with gas prices. So there are a lot of benefits, even for the individual, if you can make that investment in the better choice.
Yeah.
But you have to have kind of a long-term view. You can't just think in the here and now, this year, how is it gonna, you have to think 5 years down the road, and then you feel good about your choice if you make the right choice, So that's an added benefit, added value.
Yeah, most definitely. Well, I must say, Joy, it has been an absolute pleasure. I've really, really enjoyed this talk. I feel I've learned a ton myself and enlightened my own ideas about issues relating to sustainability, and I'm sure a lot of the listeners will have as well. So, I can't thank you enough for coming on the show today.
Oh, thank you so much. And I am no expert. I am just a student. I am just a researcher. I am learning and evolving. And I think if we all think like that about anything in life, that we just are becoming sponges and keep taking in new knowledge and making better choices when we can and supporting others, that's a great goal for having a more meaningful life, right?
Agreed. Perfect way to end the show today. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone.
For those interested in learning more about Joy and her work, you can find and connect with her via LinkedIn and also through her website, inboundambassador.com. This information will be included in the show notes, so don't worry, it'll all be there for you to go check out later. Also, if you like today's show, please be sure to share. Of course, it helps the show grow, but also I think it's great just for all of us to be learning a little bit more about one another and what we're doing, the joys, the stresses, the pressures. I think it brings us all together. It adds to empathy, and hey, it's never a bad thing, right? Also, please be sure to rate, review, and subscribe wherever you access your podcasts. Also, you can head on over to YouTube, where we recently launched a channel there under Life as a. You can check out the full video episodes of these talks. And then finally, don't forget to tune in for the next episode of Life as a, where we'll continue to explore and unearth the details of professions and the people behind them. I'm your host, Christopher Schoenwald. Until next time, stay curious about life and living.